Hi boys and girls, welcome to 6th grade physical science, and today's standard that we're going to cover states to compare and contrast magnetic, electric, frictional, and gravitational forces. So what does it mean to compare and contrast? Well, to compare objects means to talk about their similarities. To contrast objects means to identify the differences. And in this lesson, we're going to define the four forces that we're talking about: magnetic, electric, frictional, and gravitational forces. And then at the end, I'm going to share a chart with you that just shows you a few basic differences and similarities between them. So these are the four main forces that affect objects on Earth every day: friction, magnetism, gravity, and electrical forces. Let's review what a force is. And we went over this in prior lessons, but let's just review that skill one more time. So a force is any push or pull on an object that causes that object to move, to stop, to speed up, or to change its direction. If an object starts to move, stops moving, or changes speed and direction only when a force can act on it. Some forces act on objects directly, and other forces, such as gravity and magnetism, act on objects at a distance. The first force we're going to discuss is magnetic force. And magnetic force is the attraction or the repulsion between substances made of certain materials, such as iron, nickel, cobalt, or steel. It's always with a metal substance, but not all metal substances are magnetic, so it depends on the type of metal. The force of magnetism, simply put, is due to the motion of electric charges. Magnets are present in most electronic devices. In fact, anything that has a motor uses a magnet. An electric force is another example of a force that also involves the attraction or the repulsion of an object, but this is due to its charges, so it's positive and negative charges. An electric force depends on distance. Two charged objects produce a larger electric force when they're closer together. Charged objects have potential electric energy. This is sometimes called static electricity because the electrons are moving. When charged objects are close to each other, the potential energy can become kinetic energy. If the charges on the objects are the same, the objects will repel each other. If the charges are opposite, the objects are drawn together. If the objects touch or come very close to each other, electrons may flow from one object to another. So if you look at the picture I have with the balloons, you can see there is what we refer to as static electricity between the hair and the balloon, and you can see that the hair is attracted to the balloon because those negative and positive charges are attracted to one another. And if you look at the picture with the yellow balloons, you'll see that they are repelling each other because they are both the negative charges, and the negative charges cause a repulsion to take place between the two balloons. Now, a frictional force is one that we use in our lives every day just for basic motion, for walking on the ground. Friction is what keeps your shoes and the ground, for keeping you from slipping and falling between the surface of your shoes and the surface of the ground. So let's define what is a frictional force. A force that opposes or is against motion when two surfaces rub against each other. For my example here, the first example, I'm going to use a baseball player. So when a baseball player slides into second base, the friction of his or her legs rubbing on the dirt provides enough force to stop. So between the surface of the skin or the pants on the legs to the dirt on the ground, when one slides, they eventually come to a stop because of friction. In the picture to the left, there's friction between the wheels of the skateboard and the ground. The rider has to use a force to push off the ground for the wheels to roll along the surface, as friction causes the rider to slow down or even to come to a stop. A gravitational force is the force that pulls all objects in the universe toward one another. This is the force that holds things to the surface of the Earth. The strength of gravitation between two objects depends on the mass of the objects. The strength of gravitation between two objects also depends on the distance between the objects. When two objects are close to each other, they are pulled together by a greater force than if they were far apart. The greater the distance between the two objects, the less the force of gravitation acts on them. For my picture here, there is an example of a parachuter and objects that have been released with some parachutes. to show the attraction between the two objects. And the objects we're talking about is the material attached to the parachute and Earth's surface. So gravitational force is also directly dependent upon mass, and the Earth is the largest piece of mass in our immediate area. So we are drawn and attracted to the center of our Earth. It's what holds and keeps all of the objects on Earth and in its place. The moon is also a very large mass and object, and so is the sun that we are close to. But the moon is attracted to the Earth, which is why it stays in orbit as it goes around the Earth. It keeps its distance for other reasons, but gravity is what keeps the moon in orbit around the Earth. Gravity is also what keeps the Earth in orbit around the sun. So here is the comparison chart between the four forces that were defined. Across the top, you'll see the forces listed: magnetic, gravitational, friction, and electric. And then on the left, you're just going to see some characteristic traits with them and what they apply to. So for example, friction is directly related to gravity. If we look at distance, if we go down the left-hand side, all of the forces that are directly related to distance is magnetic, gravitational, and electric. Mass is gravitational and friction. And for the electric charges, it's both magnetic and electric forces. So hopefully that chart will be beneficial in kind of seeing, like, visually where they have some similarities and then also where they have some differences.